Welcome to the Intercut Film Club here on the Intercut Podcast channel, where we take a look at a movie that people can't cut away from. I'm your co-host, Zachary Shevich, and joining me, he heard their prayers, but did he hear their screams? It's Arturo Zurita.
We heard their protests. We've heard their cries. These are two movies that to this day I feel much less silence, I guess. But Last Temptation. Anytime this plays, there's always somebody with one picket fence outside a theater trying to complain about it.
Yeah, I mean, Last Temptation particularly is a movie that had a lot of controversy and protests and death threats sent Scorsese's way. It was not the easiest production for him, even in terms of the behind the scenes. Because he originally was hoping to make this film after The King of Comedy, a movie we talked about on Scorsese-tober last week.
And then had to go do.
Exactly. Then he went on to make After Hours, and I think Color of Money also came in between. This was a movie that he was originally had set up at Paramount for around $14 million back in 1984. And eventually it found its way to Universal at half the price. So Scorsese, this is a project that he had long wanted to make. He optioned the novel in the late 1970s and had Paul Schrader, his friend and collaborator from Taxi Driver, adapt the script. And he spent about a decade trying to work on this passion project, something that he had always wanted to do, make a movie about the life of Jesus Christ. And it's interesting to see what Scorsese does with a project that he's particularly passionate about, because not only Last Temptation of Christ, but Silence is a film that he was able to stretch a budget and really push the limits of what his filmmaking was capable of. He made both films kind of minimalist in certain senses and very evocative through their imagery. So there's lots of things they share aside from their sort of fascination with religion. Two really interesting movies, two movies that I hadn't seen before we decided to launch into this edition of Scorsese-tober. So I'm fresh off of them. You had caught at least Silence beforehand, but I don't think you had seen Last Temptation of Christ either. Let's start with that one, because it is a pretty interesting film in terms of its depiction of a story that lots of people are familiar with, because as the opening title cards let us know, this is not a story that is adapted from the Gospels, but rather a novel. So there are some differences, but a lot of similarities, I guess, to the way that the story plays out, I guess, compared to how most people know it. Art, I feel like you've studied the texts maybe more closely than I have. So what were your first reactions, I guess, to Scorsese's depiction of iconic historical figure who lots of people come in with all sorts of predispositions about and opinions about, and what he chooses to focus on with the story in The Last Temptation of Christ?
Yeah, I read the original book. I've gone through it a couple times. This is one that comes with like so much baggage that people have discussed this movie to death and have opinions on it. Well, opinions without even watching the movie. So I had heard about like the churches that had raised $10 million to buy out every film reel just so they could burn it so that this movie wouldn't exist. So you think like it's going to be the most blasphemous piece of work. So getting greeted to the opening title that says what you were describing of it being more of a fictional account, but more so the line I wrote down was that it says it's based on the internal spiritual conflict. And like that's the part of it that like really stood out to me. It is a very long movie, but it's a movie in where it's not coming at it from like, the Catholic Christian perspective of looking at this figure of Jesus Christ and going, yes, this person's right, and everybody else who got in his way, how could they not understand he was the Son of God? This is looking at it from a perspective of a man who has become human. It's not the Jesus that's so powerful he has no temptations. He's so powerful he knows everything that's going on. He's a confused man out in the heat, working like a 9-to-5. He's got all of these doubts, and it was such a profound way to humanize what is this human story. Like the whole purpose of the gospel is supposed to be that the Son of God becomes human to be able to know what mankind is like, to be able to speak to people in that sense, right? And so many movies, I think, glorify it to a degree that there could be no wrong there, that you can't really be like Christ if Christ is an errorless figure, right? And there are a lot of moments in the Bible where, you know, he does doubt. There is that point in when he's in the woods and he's crying right before he gets taken, that leads to the, you know, the crucifixion, where he's saying, if I could, you know, get this burden taken off of me, that would be really great, God. I don't want to go through this. And that, to a degree, is the opposite of the story of Job, another biblical character who never doubted God, and he's praised for that. And now you have the man of, you know, the Son of God, who did almost want that to pass by him. And the way that the story covers it, I thought was an incredibly, like, it's unblasphemous. I want to say, I don't think it's highlighting it to. It's an even more spiritual film than I expected it to be from all the complaints that were out there.
Yeah, it feels like a very reverent film, right? It's not trying to be particularly subversive. It's just that, like, I think most people who've tried to tackle this story or things like this do it in this kind of like pure flicks style way, which is really focused on this you know, person who's both human and God, but focus on the godly aspects of him. And this is a film that is really focused on the human aspects of that story and what it might be like for a human to realize they're the Messiah, and all the complicated feelings and anger and sadness and excitement. And and it's a really kind of like beautiful complicated portrayal of that. I was surprised with how kind of like fresh and alive it felt in this depiction of it, because you go into a story like this which is taking you through some familiar ideas for, you know, a pretty long time. This is one of Scorsese's longer films at 2 hours 41 minutes, I believe, 44 maybe.
It's long. Yeah.
But like he does make it feel kind of like lived in and like you can actually feel the presence of humanity there in a way that I don't know if these stories are always treated that way.
Exactly. You know, if it's about a deity becoming human incarnate, that also comes with the mind, right? Like what it's like to have that human mind. And a killer performance from Willem Dafoe. We were just touting him in Poor Things, and we were saying, like, no matter what movie he's in, we've never seen a bad Willem Dafoe performance. And the way that he comes in as like this chipper dude, you know, he's been given the word, he knows what he's supposed to do, and he's almost battling with it. Like, is it going to be an easy thing to do? You know, if you've read the Bible, all those lines that are in red that are supposed to be what Jesus said, you're seeing them revisited here, but with different cadences. Like, it's not said like it's this holy deity talking to a disciple. He's talking to a friend. Like he's bantering back and forth. Is this something we should do? And sometimes the disciples will be like, I don't know about that, Jesus. Like this isn't the way to go about it. And there are moments where he's coming up to the Sanhedrin, right? Like he's coming up to the established people who are there. And you get to see the perspective of, you know, not 2,000 years removed of going, don't they know this is the man of God? Man, at that time, when everything's working the way it's working and taxes are being paid, for a dude to come in and flip tables and be like, y'all don't understand. Y'all are the old law, I am the new. This movie puts you into that time period like no other movie can. Every other movie's got this gloss to it, right? Like you said, that pure flicks look at it. But it's okay to look at it and be like, yes, we know he's right. But like you have to understand why there was so much push and pull. I was reading up how Scorsese specifically wanted all the disciples to be New Yorkers because he felt that they were street guys, that all the disciples were all these schmucks that he just picked up along the way. And I'm always confused with movies like this and The Exorcist, you know, films that people consider to be these like very devilish movies, I guess, when they're actually in the heart of it. And I wonder if like getting too close to it is what makes people like fear these movies. Because in The Exorcist, that's a movie that's proving evil, and in proving evil, you're proving the opposite, the solution, which is, you know, God. In this, the way that he picked up all of his disciples in the Bible, it was a tax collector. It was a bunch of schmucks who didn't do anything. Like that is what the Bible's telling you. So for you to push against that once you see a proper depiction on screen makes me wonder if y'all ever read the Bible. And a lot of the buildup to it is like him realizing what his fears are. And I think humanizing that character there's this line where he goes, "Don't go telling lies about me, or I'll go tell the truth about you." And it's like, bro, that's like a Kendrick line that I know.
Yeah.
So to see it delivered here from this wisecracking dude who was just going from town to town and was able to build his following, I don't know, it felt real. None of it felt blasphemous to me. Until you get to the ending, right? And I think this is like a pushback that a lot of people have when it comes to superhero figures, you know? I'm not saying that I love Man of Steel, but I know a lot of pushback to Man of Steel is that a Superman character, you know, a Superman cannot have blemishes. So I think to showcase a doubting Messiah is something people don't want to see. But it's in the book. Like, it's in the book that you have at home. And this is just like a perfect interpretation of it. There is a point towards the end of the movie, if we're in full spoilers,
Let's get
where
into it, yeah.
a lot of the pushback comes from this alternate reality, right?
Yeah.
He is up there on the cross, and he realizes, as he gets tempted by the devil, something that you already see in the Bible that happens to him when he gets tempted in the desert. Something that he has in the woods, like I was mentioning, right before he gets taken away and betrayed. But here, he imagines it. And I think people assume that that is the ending of the movie, and they cannot comprehend this idea of he did go through those doubts. To be like Christ is to showcase that he did feel those things and then chose the correct path. He sees this vision of what it would be like to get off of that cross as the Son of God who can, and to live this life with a lover, with Mary, to have a child, and to grow old without having to take that responsibility.
The movie is
Then
called The Last Temptation of Christ.
Like, I'm watching this movie going, y'all had it wrong. And that seems to be the case with every Martin Scorsese film, doesn't it? It is
absolutely.
such a profound take of the temptations and the tribulations that he overcame to fight that last trial. Which the temptation isn't even to live life; it's to escape death.
Yeah,
and he does it. He embraces it. I don't know, man. This is like the most religious movie that I feel is so has been dunked on for so long, and it's like y'all don't realize this is like the biggest disciple track that you could have out there. I was blown away by it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty remarkable achievement. I mean, Scorsese himself is a person who, at one point, imagined himself going into the priesthood, and he's a Catholic who has admittedly gone through periods where he felt closer and further from his faith. But this is certainly the film of somebody who has dealt with the idea of what it means to wrestle with your faith and struggle with your continued belief, but ultimately persevere through it, right? Like this feels like a film of a believer, and it's pretty remarkable. It's really striking, and I don't know. I think it's really cool that you responded to it so strongly. We talked about how long it is. I do think that I maybe got a little bit restless with some of the
for sure,
you know, because you are ultimately going through a lot of things that are vaguely familiar, even if they're presented in a fresh way. But yeah, were you as restless as I sounded, or did you kind of find yourself pretty captivated by it?
It is long. I'm not going to deny that, right? As interesting as it was to see how they flip or interpret a lot of the scenes, it's a pretty long movie. I don't know what parts could have been trimmed back because I'm not exactly sure what it is that he really resonated with in the novel, which both of these are based on. But yeah, there are aspects to it where maybe because he's trying to showcase how he builds that following, he wanted to make it that epic journey. But I think for the most part, if you were to compare this to, and I'm trying to remember the name of it, it's that upcoming movie by the guy who did the Harder They Fall. He's got that one with Lakeith Stanfield that's coming out, where the take on Jesus there is that they've been grifters the entire time.
Yeah.
Mia and Earl's in there. It's the Book of Somebody.
Clarence.
So that's a movie that I can see why people think it's sacrilegious, because that's a take on Jesus being a dude who was just able to dupe a bunch of people. This puts it super close where it has him being the deity, but at the same time understanding why he came off the way he did to a bunch of the people around him. And I think while the runtime is long, it builds up to why they wanted to crucify him, while at the same time it being juxtaposed to him accepting what he needs to do as the Son of God.
What was your take on Harvey Keitel's Judas? Because I know that is a portrayal that not a lot of people are fans of.
Look, maybe it's because I just wanted something new. I thought that was raw. Again,
I
hearing his take,
too.
I kind of dug it too. I heard he got a Razzie nomination for this. That sucked, dude. I look again. That take that he said that he wanted New Yorkers because he felt that all the disciples were like these street dudes.
Yeah,
I thought it fit him perfectly. I thought it made that relationship more authentic. You know, you're always seeing or reading or hearing that the relationship with the disciples was like this very. Not even Batman and Robin-ish, but it's like, I am on top and you are there. And they felt like bros. And I think that was a very heartfelt way to approach it. I didn't mind it so many years removed, I guess, from how this must have been perceived when it came out.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, Last Temptation of Christ, I mean, it's continues to go back to the thing that we've been talking about with these Scorsese-tober films, that he is somebody who sees ahead of the times and that his films resonate well beyond when they're made. Definitely a remarkable movie. I personally was more struck by the next film that we're going to talk about, Silence. I
got an ending, though. Did you hear what happened? You know how the movie ends with, like, the film bird?
Oh, yeah.
Accident.
Really?
The moment that he dies, they did not realize, olden days, that it had whited out. They develop it, and he goes, it's a sign of God. And it becomes the ending of the movie.
That's amazing. I mean, Scorsese be able to roll with the punches among the best of them, I guess.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
But you like Silence more.
I did. I was really struck by this one movie that he made more recently, in 2016, following Wolf of Wall Street, which at the time, which is still his highest grossing film. Yeah. So he was able to parlay some of that into the production of this.
He did.
And yeah, it is a really striking movie that follows a pair of Jesuit priests who traveled to Japan as missionaries to also follow in the footsteps of a veteran priest who has gone missing for several years in Japan. And it is, again, Scorsese wrestling with the idea of how does faith persevere against the most trying of circumstances. Here, it's the religious persecution that Christians and priests in Japan faced in the 1600s. And it is a really stunning and harrowing film. The just environmental the environmental cinematography, and it has this really painterly quality. He and cinematographer Rodrigo Prieto talked about being inspired by Baroque paintings and the way that they assembled some of the frames here. I mean, it is a gorgeous movie to look at, which is a bit of a contrast to the like really horrifying things that are depicted, the various methods of torture and the violence that is enacted on these people in forms of religious persecution. I think because perhaps The Last Temptation of Christ is about this, even though he is very human in this film, ultimately a godly figure, I found more to connect to in the depiction of these humans and how they struggle with what they feel is their calling against, all this evidence or persuasion that they are perhaps, not going to endure it or that they don't know the truth or whatever it is. This isn't the first time that you've seen Silence. You saw it before, but I don't know if you got a chance to revisit it. What did you think about the more recent venture into Scorsese wrestling with his faith?
The first thing that I want to go off is the locations you had mentioned, because last week we had talked about in After Hours and
King of Comedy.
The way he showcased New York in both of those movies is such a time capsule, and he just shot them beautifully. They don't make movies like this anymore, even though this one was in 2016. The way he shot on location for Last Temptation, like, it makes a difference when you're, by the seaside. Here, like you were saying, to contrast all the horrific things that are happening, but within these vistas, like, it's stunning. I really appreciate Silence. I think it is a very good movie. I have some thoughts on the ending that haven't changed, and I know a lot of people don't agree with me. So that's definitely what we'll lead to. I know you had mentioned this being his passion project. I had seen that this was the first one he wrote. So, like, since Casino. So
Yeah.
that was like, that's how much it meant to him. One of the things I wanted to watch, I didn't have time to because of the Chicago screenings, was the other two movies that are based off this novel. And I had heard that the ending might be different. I can't comment fully because I haven't read the novel or seen those other interpretations of it. But again, it'll lead to the discussion of what you think of this journey that they go through. Because it's pretty. I had called it. I put Portuguese Jesuit priests in Japan saving Private Priest Ferreira, because that's pretty much what they go. They go in there trying to. If I'm not mistaken, it's
Liam
Neeson.
Yeah.
And in trying to retrieve him, we're full spoilers, right?
Yeah.
The way that they get divided between Driver's character and Garfield's character of testing their faith in terms of how far can you go before you denounce. Right. And I know that there are different interpretations in Catholicism, to just all the branches of Christianity. In faith, what you say is it as important as what you do. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a fascinating conversation for the movie. So I'm here to ask you, Zach, the things that you say in public, are they indicative of everything that you do in private? Can you say something and then still be like, no, but I said no to God, but I still kept them in the background?
Yeah.
How do you interpret? How do you take those things? Because I'd say you're not as religious. So for you, the approach of like what these characters go through, especially in that setting, how you took it.
Yeah, well, like, I am not religious, so when somebody offers me, like, denounce God or these people will die, to me, that's no question at all. But I think what makes the film so fascinating is that this is, like, this really gigantic question, and it is something that it's not even really a matter of, like, practicality, because it's a matter of, in a way, denying your own existence, like denying more than what you believe, but what you've built your entire character around, is like not succumbing and having the strength through your love of God, right? Yes. That's ultimately what I found so fascinating here, is to see the movie wrestle with that, and particularly the journey that Rodriguez, Andrew Garfield's character, goes on. It is so harrowing and taxing, and it just, I don't know, it is maddening in a certain way. I really kind of want to talk about the character of Kijichiro in particular as well, because there's this Japanese guide of sorts who sort of comes in and out of the film at various points. And it ends up being this really big test of faith for Garfield's character Rodriguez, because he's he's a man desperately in need of confession and of feeling absolved, but he's not somebody who really feels like he deserves kindness for all the ways that he showed his cowardice and all the ways that he's betrayed people that are close to him. So as the circumstances get more dire and things become even closer and closer to danger for Rodriguez, he has to surmount the love. He has to really conjure up this love from a deep reserve in order to keep treating Kijichiro with kindness and to keep facilitating Kijichiro's relationship with God.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I heard Ken Watanabe was originally going to be in. I think some scheduling issues had happened, which would have been it. Right, it would have been really interesting to see that take, even with I was about to say Passion of the Christ.
Yeah,
Temptation. It's going to be De Niro. I can't even imagine a version with De Niro. But
yeah. Well, talking about alternate casting for this movie, at least the original version had Daniel Day-Lewis in the Liam Neeson role, then Benicio del Toro and Gael Garcia Bernal in the priest roles.
I'm glad you brought that up. One, Neeson being swapped out for DDL. Because I think one was going to do Lincoln and then the other one was going to do this, and then they took each other's roles. Daniel Day-Lewis is the GOAT. I think Neeson is incredible in this movie. I think he's very good in this movie.
Is it the last good acting he's done?
No. The episode of Atlanta.
You're right.
But Gael Garcia and Benicio del Toro might have. I think that's what I needed.
Yeah. Was it that you didn't think Garfield and Driver did what was necessary, or yeah, is it that like that broke immersion for you?
I think that's one big part of it in a movie where you're already dealing with honesty and truth. But I will say, that casting to the side, one of the big parts of it is, they go through this journey not only spiritually and mentally, but you see it physically with the amount of weight that they lose, which is crazy to think that Garfield would go on to do Hacksaw Ridge right after this. But there is a big aspect, like you're saying, in terms of looking at practically and then looking at it religiously. What's happening to them mentally? If what they're supposed to believe in gets compromised, then is it all for naught? Like, that's a big discussion that they end up having with Neeson's character when he's almost pitching them, like, resigned it. It's almost like a Apocalypse Now, towards the end of that movie when they finally find Marlon Brando. But in this, like, I don't know. I think my big thing with the movie that kind of stood out this time around is that there's a moment later on when he looks into the water and he sees Jesus.
Yeah.
And Jesus speaks to him.
And more than seeing Jesus, he kind of sees Jesus in himself. It's his own reflection, and it sort of transforms into the picture of Jesus.
So this time around, I took that idea of like, wait, I see a lot of religious people like this movie more than Last Temptation, but I see a failure in this movie by the rules of a religious person, right?
Right.
By their rules, he rescinded it. Mm-hmm. But then I get to this moment, and it's also Kieran Hines, as I see in the credits, voicing Jesus. That being the actor who sent them on this mission to begin with.
Yeah, they're sort of partial, I guess you could say, like a mentor or like a elder, yeah.
Who they're really following.
Yeah.
And that's what got me thinking into another perspective of this movie where ironically I'm going to stand with The Last Temptation of Christ is the more religious movie, and this I almost feel is the complete opposite.
Yeah,
I almost feel... Go.
No, you finish your thought. I'm sorry.
If he is hearing the person who he's more scared of because it's the person who tells him where to go, then he's not really following Jesus. Like you said, he's following his own guilt. It's like a kid who doesn't really believe in God. It's just his parents who told him to.
Well, I mean, he's hearing the voice that showed him the way, right? That showed him the light or whatever it is. And I don't know. I think there's something really interesting in that. And maybe it's because I don't have that backing of faith that I bringing in the movie that I feel like it's almost him making his own version of God. And maybe that makes him like not a good Christian by those rules or whatever. But like he's also in these unimaginable circumstances facing a kind of peril that no human can possibly face. And like, I don't know. I just, as somebody who doesn't really see the plus sides to martyrdom, maybe it's like this is a version of God that I can get on board with.
The plan that the title Silence isn't just on like them staying silent and not proclaiming his name. It's also on that idea of you're supposed to be faithful within the silence. That silence of communication with God is part of that test of faith.
Yeah, when you don't hear the voice of God, when you look for God and all you get back is silence.
And it's overcoming that.
Yeah.
And the idea is that in that, you are not giving into the hopelessness. While it feels like, what's the point? That going through that is what allows you to see the more optimistic side of it. I had read that Terrence Malick, after watching the movie, I don't know if you saw this, he sent a letter and he said, he told Scorsese, what does Christ want from us? So it's very much pushing it, to I would consider Terrence Malick one of our more spiritual. I wouldn't really call him religious, but definitely more spiritually in tuned. That to push him to that idea of like, then what's the point at the end of it all? Like, how much can you be pushed to the edge before before it loses its purpose? Like you're saying, what is the purpose of martyrdom? But I think that's, again, why I'm so conflicted with the ending of the movie, because I feel like it's telling you how far would you go in that silence, that the martyrdom serves a purpose before you throw it all away and it doesn't.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I guess we'll re-review this in 10 years, I guess. But
Yeah,
I'm still
right.
conflicted with it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And maybe again, like I hate to keep harping on this idea of it, but maybe it's because like the version of love that I'm familiar with is one that is like a love between people. And I know there's lots of people who, even if I necessarily like lose touch with them, don't see them, like I still have that love for them years later, right? And I think there's almost
Usually.
like that kind of relationship with God here, which is maybe not like most people's relationship with it, is particularly not somebody who's in the priesthood, but that it's kind of like this thing that remains there for him, that despite he being, you know, held hostage and forced to be this sort of puppet in the cog of this empire that he disagrees with, that in moments of desperation and in moments of need, that relationship is still there for him and that love is still there for him. And to me, I just found there to be a beauty in that endurance. Even if it's like not necessarily by the rules that his character would set out for. So I don't know. There's something to that I found to be really, really moving in a way.
I can see that. Yeah. Because if I take that all to the side, that's a great point.
Yeah. So now that you have seen both of these Scorsese wrestling with Christianity movies, would you say that Last Temptation of Christ is your preferred one?
Between these two, I was very surprised with how much that holds up. Again, with Willem Dafoe's performance, just the way he's able to visualize it, the settings that he had there, and just his take on a lot of these, iconic chapters in the Bible, conversations that happened within his disciples that I thought he portrayed better than a lot of other interpretations of Jesus.
How high up on your like best Scorsese movies does it ultimately rank?
I don't know. It's not in my top 5, that's for sure. It feels bad to say that it's lower, but it's like something's got to be the lowest, right?
Yeah.
And it'd be on the latter half for sure. But that's not a bad thing for me.
Maybe
But like silence isn't a bad thing.
Did you go like 4-star on Letterboxd or something like that? 3.5?
Yeah, I'd probably go 4 stars, and I'd also probably say the same thing for Silence. My emotional take on Silence and my perspective of it from what they are as priests going into it is completely separate to it being another masterful picture that he's shot, and it's crazy to think that you were mentioning the behind the scenes with Paramount. He was almost going to shoot Silence in 3D.
Yeah,
Then,
I saw that.
Then decided the last minute not to.
What a weird 3D experience that would have been. I don't know
right?
Yeah, if I need to see all those like torture devices
The
like
crucifix
coming
right
out the screen at me.
Yeah. I don't know. Just at the end of it all, the idea that was the movie that really set him and Paramount ablaze to the point that that's what caused him to pivot over to the Netflix model, and now with him working with Apple, but with Paramount again, because I think Paramount is the one who's releasing Killers of the Flower Moon. All I can say is Scorsese definitely has the most faith in himself, because this man perseveres through it all.
Absolutely. I think I prefer Silence from these two movies, and there is a prompt going around on Twitter or X right now. People are listing their top 5 Scorsese movies in honor of the release of Killers of the Flower Moon. I was trying to think of my 5, and I feel pretty confident in my 3. But when I get to like 4, 5, there's a few movies floating around in there, stuff like The Departed, stuff like The Aviator, stuff like Goodfellas. And I think I got Silence floating around in that maybe like top 4 to top 8 Scorsese movies for me. But yeah, I ended up really, really responding to this one. I like it quite a bit. Cool. I think I went 4.5 on Letterboxd for that.
Ooh, that's no joke.
Yeah. And then I went only 3.5 on Last Temptation, but it's still a very good movie.
It's long. Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, I'm really glad to have caught up with these. A couple more notches on the Scorsese filmography. We are going... missing? Oh, man. Yeah.
Killers, I guess, for me.
Yeah, Killers of the Flower Moon. You're going to catch that one soon, hopefully. I think... What's the next Scorsese movie I want to tackle? You know what movie I haven't seen of his that I really want to is Italian American, the one where he...
His parents?
Yeah.
I think I saw it on YouTube.
Yeah, I think it is on YouTube.
Fantastic. Hilarious. She's the best.
Yeah. I'm going to catch up with that one next, maybe.
Bringing Out the Dead.
Okay. So we have some more movies to talk about next time we want to do a Scorsese deep dive, but we are going to wrap up our Scorsese-tober here on the Intercut Film Club with a discussion, including spoilers, of Killers of the Flower Moon, the upcoming 3.5-hour historical epic from Scorsese. Really excited to do that. Hope you'll all have a chance to catch that movie before we do it, because we're posting it next week, and the movie's out wide this weekend. So, wear your adult diapers if you need to. Don't hydrate too much, and get ready. Be ready to sit there for 3.5 hours, because it is a pretty staggering movie.
It is interesting to hear people say 3.5 hours for Killers of the Flower Moon. That's ridiculous. 3 hours for Taylor Swift. I don't know if the friendship bracelet gives you that extra patience. But are you going to watch it again?
I am going to watch it again, yeah. I'm excited to catch it again and kind of dive into some more of the detail of it, because it is such an epic that I feel like sometimes it can be hard to focus on the minutia of a movie that's that long. But I think there's so much detail and so many things. I've mentioned this before, but I went through the audiobook of it as well, and I just think there's so much context that isn't even given in the movie, but there is all this other detail too. So there's so much to wade through. I'm really excited for our discussion about it. Really excited for you to catch it. Really excited to talk about it with the rest of the inner cuties as well. But I think that's about all for our edition of Scorsese-tober. Art, where can people catch more from you?
You can find me over at LME Movies on all social media, hopefully logging the rest of Scorsese's things so that we can eventually have a bracket when he comes out with his next one. Yeah. That's hopefully not that far down the future.
There's rumors that he's doing another one with Leo, right?
Yeah. I was seeing people already looking forward to the documentary once it's all said and done.
Yeah. You can find me at Zshevich on various social media platforms. That's ZSHEV, as in Vox Domini. I don't know if that's a thing. ICH. And check out my YouTube or TikTok channels at Multiplex Show. And you can catch every episode of the Intercut podcast on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, whatever your favorite podcatcher is. I like Overcast. And then make sure you subscribe to not just the audio feed, but the video feed as well. YouTube.com/IntercutPod, where you can catch our pious faces as we break down the latest in entertainment. Find new episodes of the Intercut Weekend Must Watch streaming on our YouTube channel on every Monday. And please leave a comment. Maybe leave a comment on this video about what your favorite Scorsese movies are. Like this video if you've enjoyed this discussion. If you're still hearing this, I think you might owe us a like, and consider heading us over to iTunes to give us that much requested 5-star review. Follow us at Intercut Pod across our different social media platforms, as well as on Patreon, where you can support the show for as little as $1 a month and get early access to Intercut episodes like this one, as well as look into our episode outlines and invitations to our monthly patron Google Hangouts. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, it is accomplished. It is accomplished.